Hi, welcome to the Natural Doctors. I'm Dr. Jennifer Stagg.
And I'm Dr. Katie Dinello. We're so glad you're joining us. This is episode 3 of our 3-part series on weight loss. So if you haven't checked out the first 2 episodes, make sure you go back and do that. But just to recap, in episode 1, we talked about all of the root causes of weight loss resistance, things like environmental toxicity, inflammation, insulin resistance, cortisol, stress. And then in episode 2, we were a lot more specific on how to treat those, labs that we can order. So lots of great information in those first 2 episodes. And now today we're going to be talking all about GLP-1 medications. These are a really hot topic right now, and there's something that Jen and I see all the time in clinic. So GLP-1 is a peptide that our small intestine releases in response to food. And actually, the first GLP-1 medication was discovered, I think it was the 1980s, like 1981, and the drug name was exenatide. And then it continued to improve into what we now see as semaglutide, tirzepatide, right? There's so many different names for these drugs now. So they have a long history, and we do have some long-term data, but we're still a little bit iffy on how these medications work long-term, and that's something that, we're really starting to explore. So this episode is really focused on how to use these medications safely for weight loss, and more importantly, what to do long-term if you want to come off of them. And then if they're not for you and they're not for everybody, we really want to talk about how we can improve our GLP-1 levels naturally, right? Because these medications aren't for everyone, and we really should talk about how we can do this without medications. Mm-hmm. So we really, as naturopathic doctors, we've seen it all when it comes to these medications, right? I, used to prescribe these medications a lot when I worked in a state where we had prescription rights. And now, we both work at a clinic in Connecticut. And so naturopathic doctors, we don't have prescription rights. So we have a really privileged ability to support people who don't want to be on these medications and really want other options. So we both have a lot of experience with these drugs. So I think an important place to start is really understanding what GLP-1 is and how it works in the body. So do you want to start here with this?
Yeah, sure. So GLP-1 is a peptide that we produce naturally. So it's made in our gut. It's highly influenced by a healthy microbiome. So if keystone strains like Akkermansia, you may hear that out there. You might be seeing ads for that circulating on your social media. That's a really important strain of bacteria that helps our body have a better, more balanced production of GLP-1. And that peptide is naturally stimulated when we just eat. So that's kind of like the incoming cue. Really, we release that peptide, and it naturally stays around for about 5 or 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. A GLP-1 medication, which is technically a receptor agonist, is what it's called. These medications stay around for 6 days. Yep. So already you're going okay, that might be a little overkill, right? So we think very, natural. Mm-hmm. It's there could be problems here. And that's why there are a lot of expected effects. Mm-hmm. And then adverse effects and really serious side effects, right? That patients can have with these medicines because they are so strong, right? It mimics the body's natural peptide, but it stays around for much longer. It's not getting degraded as quickly. So that can create some problems. Now, what it normally does is it like allows that gut motility to sort of slow down, and that's going to make you feel full. So this is why that's an expected side effect, is that you feel full more quickly. So you're not going to overeat. And then it also helps with satiety. So a big thing people will notice and complain of is food noise. And I never heard this term so much until GLP-1s became all the rage, is everyone's talking about food noise. And we also have natural medicines that can help with food noise. We always have. But that's another key thing that people will notice with that. Now, sometimes people get really serious side effects with that slowdown in motility, and they get really nauseous. They could be vomiting. You'll have patients, like I had one this morning, and he tried it for 2 weeks and couldn't tolerate it. And he wanted to lose about 15 pounds. So maybe it wasn't necessarily the best choice in that situation. And he wasn't too upset about it, but he tried it, like basically had 2 shots and was like, yeah, this is not worth it. I'm just going to do this naturally. And he, this is a patient in his 70s, and he's down 7 pounds in 3 weeks. So you can do this naturally. But that's basically sort of like the crash course in what our GLP-1 does in the body, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other reason why these drugs are now so popular, of course, besides the fact that they do work really well for the most part when you're trying to lose weight, but it's also because, again, everything we talked about in our previous episodes, it's a natural consequence of the way our society lives right now, is that, yes, we have lower levels of this peptide. So, if we weren't eating so many processed foods and our cortisol levels weren't so high, right, and we weren't eating so quickly and we weren't stressed, right, we would have higher levels of this peptide that our body makes naturally. And so that's really where we want to focus, is how do we get our bodies to do that and bring that back, right? And so a couple of reasons why GLP-1 levels are low is, number one, with age, right? We do see that those levels decline naturally with age. Number 2 is being overweight or being obese. Number 3, having insulin resistance. We know from research that hyperglycemia, or high levels of sugar and glucose, actually cause lower levels of GLP-1. And then inflammation as well, right? When we have higher levels of inflammation, we're going to naturally make less GLP-1. So now I will say the benefit of these drugs, right, is that we have a lot of research on this peptide now. And so we can better understand, all right, how do we naturally increase these levels? So a really good place to start, like Dr. Jen was saying, is let's make sure your microbiome is healthy so we can really optimize how much GLP-1 you're able to make, right? And so we can do that by testing our microbiome, right? We can actually see what levels of good and bad bacteria we have going on. Is there any dysbiosis, right? That's a really nice way. And we both do that with our patients a lot, right?
Yeah, microbiome testing is so key there. And a lot of times with patients that are coming in and they really do want to get off a GLP-1, and kind of like our stance, I would say, is that if you're on a medication, that there should be a plan. This shouldn't be a medication for, in most circumstances, forever, right? Which is what a lot of people are kind of like being told. Like that's the language right now. Those are the recommendations. You just stay on this forever. But really it should be you've set an endpoint. So whether that's a weight range that you want to get to, is that if you're, pre-diabetic or diabetic, is that a hemoglobin A1C goal? Like you need to have an endpoint in mind. And then when we have that, we're going to set you up. This is a lot of the work that we do in our office, is not only, helping patients who don't want to take a GLP-1, who straight up, are looking for a natural approach to this, but patients who are taking it and do want to get off, and how are they going to do that and not get the rebound effect, which we know, like the data clearly shows, you're going to gain all that weight back. Right. And you're going to be down muscle. So that's another big like adverse effect to be concerned about, is that yes, you can lose significant amounts of weight, but studies are showing a third of that weight is muscle, right? And that loss of such an important like metabolic tissue is really, really concerning.
Yeah. And we see this in clinic. So what I'll often do is if a patient decides, I really want to start a GLP-1 medication, and we talk about this really thoroughly, right? We go through the pros and the cons, the consequences, right? The benefits, potential side effects. I mean, we really go in depth here so that patients can make the best decision for what they feel like is best for them. Part of that looks like doing what's called an in-body. So we are getting it's a body composition test so we can see, okay, what is your starting weight? How much muscle mass do you have? And we are monitoring that every 6 to 8 weeks when patients are on these medications so we can see, are we losing muscle mass or are we just losing fat, right? Now, it's important to note, whenever you lose weight, you are going to lose some muscle mass. That is just a natural way that weight loss happens. But we really want to do everything we can to prioritize the fat loss rather than the muscle mass
loss. Right, you're not going to lose a third of,
oh my
muscle
gosh, no.
if you're doing this naturally. Like
definitely
that,
not.
Like never occurs, right?
Mm-hmm. Nope.
Yeah, unless someone is bedridden.
Right. Yes, that's different. That's different.
Moving at all. That's the only situation where that would happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So, when we're supporting these patients, we're, making sure we're tracking muscle mass. We're certainly doing labs to make sure that their body is handling this okay, that they're not dealing with like kidney and liver damage.
I know. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but this is a really important piece that not enough people are talking about. Just like if you were to take any other medication, you want to be checking those liver function tests and those kidney function tests, because I have absolutely had patients where, thank gosh, I was checking them because, maybe their prescribing provider, they're busy, they weren't doing it. But I have had patients where their kidney function tests have significantly declined and we've had to stop the medication. So make sure someone is checking those labs in you. Again, it's not happening to everybody, but it is happening. So make sure you're on top of that.
Exactly. So there are like safety labs we need to do. And then there are things we're going to look at to really help them off board from this medication, right? So this is where, as you were mentioning, we start to really look at the microbiome, do a microbiome assessment so that once they get off this medication, they're going to produce the GLP-1 naturally much better again. So also just the situation where they're eating less food, they're not controlled by food cravings for the most part. Now you get patients that go on GLP-1s and they don't really work that well also. So like, don't think it's like perfect and works great for everyone. Like in some patients, it's like, oh, I lost a pound in a month. Like you could do way better than that naturally. But so we're getting them set up so that you're going to produce that GLP-1 naturally when you come off. And then you're also really working with them. This is a great window of time to establish all those lifestyle habits that we talked about that are so important, that are going to like keep you healthy and allow you to not be, so metabolically damaged when you come off of it. Because, your fat mass has went down and everything. A lot of inflammatory things have improved. But if you're still like eating like processed food and still getting all this exposure to toxins, your microbiome is going to be in a sad state of affairs, right?
Exactly.
So when you go off that GLP-1, you're just going to eat whatever and you're going to have no acromantia. You're not going to be able to make GLP-1 on your own anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So we really, from a naturopathic or functional medicine perspective, we take this holistic approach, right? And so I think if you are really kind of struggling with weight and you're like, should I go on one of these medications? Should I not? You want to get started with where you are, right? I think that's a huge piece. So get some microbiome testing, see where those Akkermansia levels are, see if there's any dysbiosis, and start working on that, right? Start improving your gut. Start lifting weights as well so that you can get ahead of any potential muscle mass loss, right? That's a huge piece. start eating protein, right? So really take a nice holistic approach here so that you're not just relying on the medication and that you really are setting yourself up for long-term success. It's a really important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I'm aware of many functional medicine clinics like where you worked before, where it is managed in a way where patients can't get their medication unless they're getting their muscle level tested, they're having dietary consults to make sure they're on track, that you can do this in as safe a way as possible, right?
Yeah. So should we move on and talk a little bit about ways that, for patients who don't want to go on a GLP-1, like how are we naturally increasing those levels for people?
Yep.
Let's start.
That's a great idea. So we talked a lot about the microbiome. So that is the first place to really focus on and make sure we're giving supportive, really specific supportive nutrients. And so you can actually supplement with Akkermansia in some of these patients to give that immediate effect more quickly while you're working on building up the Akkermansia level. So when you're taking a supplement of Akkermansia, the one that I like the most is by the Akkermansia company, and they have a pasteurized version. So it has been really thoroughly clinically studied, and it works better than the live version actually, which is why I use that one. That particular strain is going to help you actually lose weight. And there's a study that shows that when patients went on a low calorie diet and they were taking that specific supplement, that when they went off the low calorie diet, they actually maintained their weight loss, which is really cool to see. The other thing then that I really start to work with is increasing the amount of bitters in the diet. So primarily from a dietary standpoint, again, you can use supplements that are very bitter, right? So you can use tinctures, you can use tablets that you taste bitter, and it stimulates this bitter response. It stimulates these bitter receptors in your body, and that is also keyed into the GLP-1 pathway as well. So that's another key place. Some of my favorite bitter foods, arugula, I think is probably my favorite. But also teas like green tea, I'll bring that up again. That's actually a bitter, right? Dandelion, burdock, like there are some things that you'll see more so in tincture form. Some of those tinctures and tablets will have gentian in there, which is super, super bitter. But a lot of the foods, when you're eating a really sort of plant-based, really or plant-rich diet, you're going to end up naturally having a lot more bitters. I do want to bring up the point that another problem with how our culture and the food industry is basically destroying our health. I'll get on my soapbox. Is the intentional debittering of our food supply. So our food supply, if you're eating conventional produce, it tastes a certain way, sweeter for the American palate because the bitter tasting components in that plant have been bred out of the plant. And so it gives it a different flavor profile, which I don't think tastes any better. I like the bitter version of it. It actually, if you taste a tomato that's conventional, it doesn't taste like what an heirloom tomato tastes like. And the problem with that is now you have a sluggish digestive function, right? Those bitters stimulate your whole digestive process. And you're going to have lower GLP-1. So look at us in this situation where we're a society that is overusing GLP-1s, and 70% of us are overweight, and 40+% are obese.
Exactly.
And it's food industry driven.
Yes, it really is. I love everything that you just said, right? I also think about apples, how they should be so much tartar than they are. And they're so sweet. And again, we've created that, right? That's not
intentional.
Yes, exactly.
It's criminal.
Yes. Okay. Really great. Something else that I do to support the microbiome is I focus a lot on fiber, right? And so We really want to increase fiber for a couple of different reasons. Number one, again, it's the more often that we're eating, which that's a little bit nuanced. So I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the more often we're eating, we're able to secrete more GLP-1, right? So that's great. But number two, we really want to have great healthy fibers that are going to stimulate the production of things like butyrate and other short chain fatty acids. It's a huge piece when it comes to naturally supporting GLP-1 levels. And so, of course, we want to do this through food as much as we can. And I really encourage you, if you have no idea how much fiber you're getting in a day, just take a day where you are doing a little bit of research and tracking how much fiber you're getting and see where you stand. We really, at the minimum, 20, 25 grams, but we really should be pushing 30, 35 grams if we can get there. And so that's an important piece. And again, we're looking at our leafy greens, all of our vegetables, our fruits, our legumes, our beans. These are all going to be really rich in fiber. So that's what we want to focus on. But secondly, this is a nice place where we can add in some supplements here. So, we work with a lot of great reputable supplement companies that have done some awesome research on how can we create these great fiber supplements that really help support the production of GLP-1. So I'm really using those a lot. For patients who want to focus on satiety, who want to focus on sugar cravings, things like that. So that's really helpful. Now, I want to go back to the point that I was making about eating food, right? So we laugh because, a lot of people think, well, I'm overweight, I'm just eating too much food. But something that I see with a lot of my patients is actually that they're chronically under eating food. So a lot of my patients will have a very, very small breakfast, maybe just coffee with some cream and sugar in there. And then they're working through lunch, right? Or they're having a really small lunch, couple bites here and there, or it's some crackers or some trail mix. And then they're having this large meal at dinner. And so that is absolutely not going to be helpful for secreting those levels of GLP-1 naturally. And so if that sounds like you want to do a little bit of an audit here. You really want to try and have an equal amount of food spaced out between 2 to 3 meals, maybe 1 or 2 snacks in there, but really you want to buff up that breakfast, buff up that lunch, make sure you're getting great protein, great fiber, fruits and vegetables with both of those meals. And then dinner should actually be our smallest meal of the day. We're going to bed. We're really just hanging out with our families. We're not doing anything super physically intensive or mentally intensive. And so we don't need as much energy. So we really want to keep dinners to a little bit of a smaller portion. And that setup is what's going to naturally improve your GLP-1 levels. So hot tip.
That's great. And that's going through. I want to let you know, Dr. Katie, that one of our shared patients was commenting like that you're in her head. So your information is getting through.
Great. Yes, that's what, it's funny.
It's working.
If you are my patient, you're laughing because you know that I tell you, think about my voice in your head right throughout the day when you're making these nutrition changes.
I love it.
I know it's hard, but we really are your cheerleaders and we want you to succeed. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we don't have a lot of time left. What do we want to touch on at the end of this episode?
I think I really want to emphasize the mindset. Whether you are on a GLP-1 medication or not, mindset is really key here. And so, let's take a patient who's starting a GLP-1 medication. Before you make that decision, you want to make sure you're working with a holistic provider who is thinking about all of these things that we've touched on, right? You really want to start thinking about how you're going to use that time on the GLP-1 medication to improve your health in all ways so that when you come off of the medication, you're set up for long-term success. So that means getting a great nutrition plan with everything we talked about, getting some great microbiome testing, getting in the gym and starting to lift weights. If you've not lifted weights before, then it's really challenging to start. I'm just going to be honest. It's not easy, which is why not all of us do it. And so take this time to really explore, can you work with a personal trainer? Can you find a gym that you like, that's close, that's convenient, right? All these things really matter. And these are players that come into effect when we're thinking about all of the factors with being on a GLP-1 medication, right? So take a really holistic approach there. If you have decided that a GLP-1 medication is not for you, right? What are the mindset tools and techniques that we can really start to adapt to make it a little bit easier to focus on weight loss, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be about nutrition and medications, but that mindset piece is so important.
It is. And it also, in both circumstances, another thing I want to point out is it also is an opportunity to explore your relationship with food, right? And we do talk with patients a lot about that. How did you, what's missing? So, there's a lot that's very complex and multifactorial here in this subject area, but some of the things to explore is like, why are you eating that way? Is it truly just mindless eating? Are you dealing with, actual like emotional issues that you're turning to food? And we label that emotional eating. It gives us an opportunity to explore that. Like what needs are not being met and why are we turning to food to comfort us? And I've even had patients in the past that have even done things like hypnosis. And these things can go back really far, right? So it might be that you need to sort of like work with various different types of care providers too, to really start to dig deep and really look at your health on all those levels.
Exactly. When I have a patient who comes to me wanting weight loss, I know our conversations are going to be so much more than just weight loss, which is why I love doing this with patients, right? And helping them in this way. And I like what you said, right? You might need many different care providers on your team, a therapist, an energy worker. Do you need to do some Reiki, meditation, hypnosis, energy healing, past life regression? Gosh, there's so much that can come into play here. So we have a lot of opportunity there as well to explore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This was so great.
This was great. Thank you all so much for joining us. This closes out our weight loss series. So if you just tuned into this episode, make sure you go back and watch the other two, and make sure to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you never miss a future episode.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name's Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.